Hello and welcome to the Dark Bestiary, Chapter 1, The White Lion. My name's Fen, and I'll be your natural historian through this series, where we take a look at each of the monsters in the world of Kingdom Death, look at their lore, look at the hunt phase, the showdown phase, and the resources, and put together a full picture, including how to fight these monsters, while also appreciating their part in the game's ecosystem. We're starting with the White Lion, which is the first monster that the vast majority of players will ever face. And also, I can't really understate how this is the most important monster in Kingdom Death. There are, of course, entities who hold greater status, and the White Lion is, in fact, very, very low status in respect to its position on the totem pole and the food chain. But when it comes to being included in the world and the background and the history of everything, white lions are super important. I don't think it's simply a mechanical choice that it is a white lion that you face and fight in order to get access to the campaign. And even with the other prologue fights that we have now for the Crimson Crocodile and the Frog Dog, if you look at those, they're both called Devour the White Lion, and they do not progress without a white lion being attacked by the extra prologue monster and devoured, and then you fight the Frog Dog or the Crimson Crocodile. In fact, the only intro we've had so far with an exception to that is just the pure intro to the People of the Dreamkeeper campaign, which has its own things, but the important thing here is the White Lion kind of gatekeeps your access to getting to play. You've got to kill it before you get in any further. So let's take a look at why that might be. In this lore section and all future lore sections, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, discuss and list the stuff that's in print about these given things. I'm going to provide you with where it's from, I'm going to read it verbatim, and then after that I'm going to provide a little bit of analysis on each particular one. And the goal of this is to provide you with the source and then provide you with the elements that I think are relevant and interesting, and after all of that go into the my conclusions drawn from each thing. Once I've been through all the different lore elements, I will then provide a conclusion at the end with what I think in regards to the aspects of all of it and how it clicks together. Obviously, I just want to be clear with the disclaimer when I'm on my section of talking, and I am speculating. This is a game with unreliable narrators at times. This is a world where we've actually seen things change from one edition to the next. For example, the Gold Smoke Knight, which we will touch on a little bit in this video. The Gold Smoke Knight originally started in 1.31, the first public release of the game, as kind of a supporting character. You'd encounter it during the hunt event finale, and it would be the thing that provided you with the Thunder Maul or the other bits and pieces. It was a mostly benevolent thing. When we get to 1.5, that has of course changed. The Gold Smoke Knight is now the final nemesis. It's the big bad for People of the Lantern, and its role in the finale has been changed and swapped with the Cyclops Knight. So these kind of things, they just, things change, and that's fine. This is a game where additional elements are being added and built onto it, and while it is a top-down designed game, there's definitely room for changing. And as I said, I think there's genuinely unreliable narrators at times. The Showdown pieces often read like a fabled story that may have a kernel of truth, but might not. They read more like the survivors telling each other stories as to how they think such a thing came to be. But there is, again, in this game and world, power in stories, which is something related to the White Speakers. Anyway, we're going to start with a physical look at the White Lion miniature, and we'll also look at the White Giga Lion miniature, because the way the miniatures are, it tells a story. This is a representation of what the... Sorry, my dog is sniffing around looking for something to eat. Anyway, this is a physical representation of the entire species. So we have a bunch of aspects and things that are worth considering. First of all, the white lion has a lot of elements of the classic lion, especially when we look around at the back and everything, and essentially all of it apart from the face and the front hands, front limbs. It's very classically a lion. But we do see, first of all, the most striking thing is these hands, and it's not even thumbcat kind of hands. These are full-blown hands, to the point that if you look back here, you just get the angle. There is a pad, but it's clearly evolved and changed quite a bit. The face is another very striking thing. There's a lot more facial muscles across the forehead. That's not common in wild animals. In fact, one of the most common creatures with facial expressions, facial muscles, is man's best friend, the dog, who they've evolved over time to be able to express and emote, because that's a useful tool to communicate with us, whether you realise it or not. You know, dogs don't have hair eyebrows, except occasionally they might have a different colour of fur there. But if you look at a dog, they absolutely can and do raise and lower their eyebrows, and adds to their expression. We see this here. There's a lot more muscles, a lot more capability for facial expression. Additionally, the mouth is filled with shark teeth, quite sort of haphazard. We don't see multiple layers, but I do think, and we'll look at the white gigaline in a moment, I do think that is maybe more of a limitation of the sculpting at the time. As I said, this is quite an old sculpt. But these big key elements are very prominent. These hands, this face. So if we now go on and take a look at the white gigaline, which is a more modern sculpt, we can see it still maintains the hands. They're more defined, they're far more hand-like here. Additionally, if we look at the jaw, we can see that the shark teeth are kept in, and we now have multiple layers. So while the white gigaline is definitely an evolution from the white lion, and I'm not going to go into the details of how and why, because you just need to play through the vignette to experience and understand all of that. This is maintaining those. And also when we look at the face, we can see we have heavy brows, very muscular brows. So there's definitely this capability of expression of emotion. And we will see that as we start digging into all the other bits of lore. Let's just pull this out a bit so we can see this trio here. Fantastic. Okay. So I am now going to get on to reading through some bits of lore. I'm going to be touching on the Gold Smoke Knight, the Lion God quite heavily, the White Lion of course, a bit about the Holy Lands, and the Gold Smoke Knight, and we might even touch a little bit on some speculation about the nature of the place of stone faces, or plane of stone faces as well. So, to start with, we have from the Resin White Lion release the following. So this is a very, very old piece of lore for the White Lions. You can catch this, I believe, on KDM Collector. Many of these are recorded, or they're in the books. This one's on KDM Collector with the Resin White Lion. Huge, terrifying lions with a strange human curiosity and human hands. Their white fur shines with flecks of gold when the sunlight hits them directly, a strange contrast to their bloated and sad faces. They are a dominant predator in the Holy Lands and have become a symbol of inspiration and beauty for the entity that resides over all. Occasionally, they are trained and kept as partners by manhunters. So, the big things here is strange human curiosity, human hands. These are like being directly called to in the very first paragraph. And strange is something that is used a fair bit when talking about these oddities in regards to the lions. Another thing there is bloated and sad faces. Sadness, a sense of loss, is also kind of an element that's a part of these particular monsters. On to our next piece. There once was a beast that wanted to feel how soft its fur was. Since it could not reach its own back, it killed many other creatures and spent time rubbing its paws over them. They say that when the monster finally killed a human, it fell in love with their soft hair and its paws grew into a pair of fine human hands. This is from the White Lion Showdown. You can just see the page in the background there. So this is what I call the Showdown Fables. Little opening piece of like flavor text lore. I think in the case of this one, this is the survivors coming up with an explanation as to why these beasts have an element that is humanoid, and also explaining why they're so aggressive towards survivors. It's survivors trying to make meaning in the world. I don't think this is true, at least not in the way that they are thinking about. As for why the lions do have their hands, I think we've got better evidence for that. And in order to do it, we're going to just move on to this magnificent beast. This is the Lion God, and we're going to be reading a bunch of bits and pieces involving the Lion God because it's quite important for the White Lions, mechanically and thematically. If you are not familiar with this, the Lion God is the ruler of the now fallen Silver City, and we're going to see some more of that as we go. It's also a Node 4 monster. It's an absolute beast to fight, and it's very interesting how it has developed. So we have here this is the Lion God original pitch. So this is a kind of out of game rather than in-game lore. The Lion God is both a monster your survivors can hunt and an upgrade for the White Lion monster that comes in the core game box. This expansion has a few new gameplay features, including mixing some of the AI cards from both monsters to create unique challenges and a revenge mechanic, wherein if you kill too many of the god's younger kin, making all of those lion armor sets no doubt, there is a chance the Lion God may roll up to your settlement to take you out. Since most encounters with this legendary entity are so, in quotes, high level, I felt it was important to add a bit more campaign depth and extend the life of the good old White Lion. That way it is not just pure boss content that only enduring campaigns get to mess around with. Obviously, that's changed, and the design philosophy for what became Team Death has also changed, but we can see straight away that it's not just they both look like lions, there always was an intended connection between them. Now we'll get onto the lore pitch for the Lion God. The Lion God was once the ruler of the Silver City. Now inhabited by a large parasite known as the Knowledge Worm, the ruler has taken on this monstrous form and stalks angrily through the abandoned streets of his city. Then we have the Lion God Showdown fable. There once was a ruler that outlived their kingdom. As their body began to petrify, they were visited by a worm that offered them power in exchange for their memories. Now a mindless beast, silver oozes from its nails and warps its bones as it rages in the ruins of its city, always in pain. So, what's quite interesting about all of this is the Lion God is depicted as beginning to petrify before the worm joined with it. In fact, his petrification is being held off by that. Now, petrification in the game, we actually do see that happen to survivors. This is something that can occur in the gambler's chest, and spoilers for that. If you want to skip ahead a little bit, feel free. But spoilers, survivors who eat bones very gradually petrify and grow in size until eventually they become walking statuary in the form of the Bone Eaters, who are living statues. I think that's kind of what sort of happened with the Lion God here. It has been eating bones or carnivorous, maybe it's been fed sacrifices, it's hard to say, but it has grown beyond the original size it is at. But this was all happening before the Knowledge Worm. And if we just take a look at one of the pieces of terrain, the Lion God statue here, and here's a gear version of it, we can see this statue, which would have been carved while the Lion God was ruling the Silver City, not after the Silver City fell, depicts the lion god still with this long chin whip, with the hands, with the additional hands holding the lanterns. In fact, the only thing that's missing from here is the little weird tailworm, with hands sticking out here. I think because these are hand parasites, I believe. I think this is not original part of the lion god. If we look, we can see there's a tail nub there, and this is coming out of the sphincter instead. So that's my speculation, that this is the piece that is to do with the knowledge worm, or just parasitic infection in general, rather than actually being a proper tail, but we'll explore that more with the lion god. So we have some other interesting little bits and pieces to read, and they come in a couple of different things. So when you're fighting the lion god, you have sometimes the opportunity to explore the necropolis, which if I just flip back here we are. Right, so necropolis means city of the dead. This is entered through this mouth, which will be revealed while fighting the lion god, and we can see that immediately, very prominently, there's a lion face on here. I believe that this necropolis is the Silver City. It is referred to, if we look in the introduction, here we are. The walls and floors are covered in strange silver writing that his lantern light reflected off of. So it's called the Silver City not because it's completely silver, although it does have a somewhat silver appearance here, but because of the various different bits and pieces written or carved across it. We can also see the statues, pillars. They have lions predominantly on them as well. And I would even go as far as to say that the actual mouth here is quite sort of lion-like, but it could just be any other kind of generic maw. That's a harder thing to pin down. But yeah, what we have is a few interesting notes and bits and pieces to look at here. So if we just go in on to these events, I'm not going to read all of them here, but this one up here on a ventilation shaft on the 8+ result. These symbols in the passageway portray a kingdom of strength and majesty populated by lion-like beings. As you run your hands across a symbol, a part of it loosens and comes free, revealing a cache, and you gain the old box strange resource, which we'll take a quick look at in a moment. Additionally, if we look further down here, we can see in the vast chamber, golden sarcophagi are strewn about by rubble. As you navigate the dead, the smell of incense and flesh makes you sick. Metallic bloodstains can be seen against the deep gashes in the floor, and then if the lion god is level 3+, you get to go to the god chamber. So the god chamber is quite interesting. If we look here, we've got staggering amounts of gold and steel take on twisted forms and bear the marks of the lion god's frustration. And then on this 6+ over here, nearly everything in the crowded room is mauled beyond recognition by tooth and claw. Only a sarcophagus in the centre remains untouched, and you gain this sarcophagus strange resource. That in itself also is super interesting. We can see this is a depiction of the sarcophagus. We know it's super heavy because that is a big penalty to take. Very few things reduce your movement that much, but quite significantly, this is a lion-like being depicted here. And we can see this is almost certainly an upright stance, and these are not just a true monster. This is not just like, decorated pieces. This is a depiction of the individual, and we know that even further because if we go on into Death Greeting, oh yes, I'll just stop here for a second. These are the silver markings talked about, just depicted here. But as we move on a little bit more, here we are. We can see inside the sarcophagus you find this, which we'll talk about in a moment, but let's first of all just get into the old blue box. So the old blue box contains dry painted bones wrapped in medicinal gauze and adornments. Some of the bones are fossilized. When heated, the others billow thick gold smoke into the air. The smoke's tendrils surround you, missing you in visions, and you gain the ancient lion claw rare gear. And then you have to comprehend the smoke. Comprehending the smoke, you cough uncontrollably as the smoke fills the room until nothing can be seen but the glow of a heated lantern, the heated lantern. Disorientated, you sense a hostile presence just before it strikes, dodging a flurry of claw-like blades. You focus on the lantern's light and feel as if you're able to predict your assailant's movements. With heavy vibration, the lantern light transforms into a symbol. By keeping your eyes closed, you're able to copy the symbol down after the smoke clears, and you gain the Lantern Mahindi rare gear. So this one's a bit less clear, and I'm fully on speculation with this, but I believe a flurry of claw-like blades is a common way that the inhabitants of the Silver City would attack. They would fight with these claws. We've got one we'll just look at down here in a... I hope I've got it. Yeah, down there in a moment. And I think this represents in some ways the hostile antagonistic nature between the Lanterns and the Silver City. I think that's what's talking about. I believe, and we'll get into a little bit of speculation in a moment, but I believe the Lanterns are in some way linked to the entity that caused the downfall of the Silver City. We'll find out with that. Then we have the sarcophagus. So when you activate and open this, you stare into the unblinking eyes of an enormous mummified lion head. Without warning, a gigantic insect springs forth from one of its eye sockets and stings your hand. Your vision dims as venom courses through your veins. Greet death. Feverish and bedridden for days, you hallucinate terrifying men who possess beautiful armour and the claws of beasts. When the fever breaks, you find all of your hair has been torn out and a strangely shaped scar has taken root on your forehead, and you gain the Death Mahindi rare gear. So there's a lion head inside this sarcophagus that depicts a lion-like, humanoid-like being. And frankly, that's where I land with this, but we'll look at a few more bits and pieces before we do. So this is the ancient lion claws. They work like dagger. They provide additional supplements to daggers or claws. They're heavy, meaning they were carried by far stronger. Like, to have gauntlets like this, they're almost certainly were stronger and bigger than the humans are now. And we have the golden plate here, which is another level reward. I think, and we'll get into a moment why, but I think this face here, this depicts the Gold Smoke Knight, or the Golden Knight as it was known in the time. I don't think this is just a depiction of the lions themselves. It's very explicitly called the Golden Plate, and let's go have a look at them. Right, so physicality. We can see first of all the Thunderhammer has a lion head. Let's hide that for a moment. Has a lion head. These on the shoulders, we can see they're not like high res here, but you have your model to take a look at. They're lion faces, just here and here. Itself has a lion head or cat-like head, and has a cat-like set of furs. There's a lot of cat elements to this, and to add into that, we have for the Gold Smoke Knight resin release this piece of text. This again can be found on KDM Collector with the Gold Smoke Knight resin. There once was a fertile land of golden grass and prideful lions. Uncounted centuries ago, a parasite took root, and over time a corrupted city grew to engulf the plains. The Golden Knight, a mysterious guardian of these lands, waged a losing war against the corruption. As futile years passed, the knight's appearance grew twisted and haggard as the land itself. Its glorious mane fell out, replaced by angry, wailing smoke billowing in its place, and the Gold Smoke Knight was born. Now, for a little bit of additional, this is where I'm going to have to paraphrase. Travis, formerly of Tech Raptor, reached out to Adam directly and asked for a little bit more of an explanation of what the Gold Smoke Knight was about. And the key thing to take away from this particular linking was that the Golden Knight and the Gold Smoke Knight, same thing, is linked to the land. It's like an elemental knight, to use Adam's words there. And so it now manifests the corruption of the land. There's a lot more we could talk about with the Gold Smoke Knight, but that's going to stay for its particular recording. The main thing to note is that at its peak, at its prime, it looked like a lion. It had a big lion mane. It has a lot of lion markings to it, and I think its face was like that on the Golden Plate originally, with this large, magnificent, probably gold shimmering mane of hair that it no longer has. Okay, so if we just come over here, there's two more I'd just like to highlight and look at. This is the Manhunter and the Lion Knight. Now, In the case of the Manhunter, we can see here on the handle, there's a little lion face on Death Pact. So this is a reference to Manhunters using white lions as pets, as hunting companions. Another interesting thing is that the way the Manhunter looks, this kind of, I always think of it as like a half-boiled sort of Frankenstein's monster appearance to him. This seems to be what many inhabitants of the Holy Lands look like underneath it all. The Lion Knight first, the first Lion Knight, which was a resin release, you can see it on KDM Collector, has a lot of similarities in this. And I bring that up because this is the second Lion Knight here, and this dude is cosplaying. This is a mask. This is not his real hair. He doesn't have claws. These are like replicas of what the White Lions would use. Underneath it all, he likely looks very similar to his predecessor, the first Lion Knight, also the Manhunter. So I wanted to just mention that this guy is cosplaying, is dressing up as what the White Lions may have looked like once upon a time before the, I guess the Great Erasure is what I've come to call it. If we ever get a proper name for it, I'll call it that. But it's a time where whatever happened to the Silver City happened, and the world started transforming into what it actually is. So that's a bunch of things. It's time for us to put a little bow on the lore section. Again, speculation. There's a lot of speculation from me here. I've tried to explain and highlight where it's come from, but what I think is the White Lions represent the degenerate forms of the inhabitants of the Silver City. They were once the dominant force in this area. They're linked to the land. The Golden Knight took on aspects to mimic their appearance and still holds them. And they built a big city, and they were huge and important. And then some parasite, some outside force came along and started undermining everything. I think this parasite is related and linked to the Watchers. I think that it is related and linked to lanterns, vines. There seems to be a lot of that. I'm going to speculate and go out on a limb here that the Parasite Queen is the thing that was responsible for all of this and is behind the plane of Stoneface's being where it is now in everything. That's my pure speculation, but I don't think it is unfair to say that these were anthropomorphic, humanoid lions. They used tools, they used weapons, they wore armour. They had a whole civilization going on until the catastrophe occurred and the Great Erasure happened, and now they are nothing more than beasts. And that's why I think they are the first monster that you face, because it's kind of a passing of the torch. It's the previous civilization versus the up-and-coming one. Even though humans are struggling to keep their settlements going long-term, because the Watchers are really, really good at their job, it is a passing of the torch, a changing of the guard, and I think that's kind of symbolic of why you have the White Lion in the prologue fight, and why even when you're not fighting the White Lion, most of the time a White Lion still dies at the start of the whole thing. It gets devoured because it's kind of gatekeeping the campaign. So there we go. That's my lore summary on the White Lions. That's why I think they're super important, and they kind of connect to so many different things. We haven't even touched on how much of the lion aesthetic the Holy Lands borrows, because those are all resin pieces, apart from Manhunter and the Lion Knight. But yeah, it's super fascinating and really, really cool. I enjoy looking at all of this, and I'm very excited for when we get the Silver City, which is going to expand further on the Lion civilization and confirm or deny what I've speculated here. And the same with the Parasite Queen. I'm taking a punt that she's responsible for this. Maybe we'll get to that. I definitely think she's responsible for the Parasite Hands, and I kind of think she's responsible for the Lanterns as well. But we'll see. So, that's the lore. Next step, we're going to look at the hunt phase, which is all the way over here. Okay, so we have here the cards for the hunt phase. I've arranged them in the kind of the system I used before, so further to the left is more predictable, to the right is more random, top row I consider to be more beneficial, bottom row more harmful. I would also have, like, in the middle, neutral. We can see, like, I think this is kind of like neutral on how it works. Yeah, that is right. Okay, so we will start with these. So these are the two, like, fixed and beneficial events. Right, so first of all, lion sculpture. A crudely arranged effigy stands before the survivors, decorated with small metal trinkets, human fingers, and stuffed with dried tall grass. The quarry sculpture confounds the survivors. The survivors gaze at the arrangement, attempting to glean the substance of the white lion's bizarre, inhuman intelligence. Each survivor gains +1 understanding, +1 insanity, and then it'll trigger a random hunt event. So you always get in the top section. I consider triggering a random hunt event to just be, like, neutral. It is a random element added to this, but it's, for me at least, I think that's kind of a fixed thing, that it always triggers that. And marked territory. White lions mark this area. If any survivor has 3+ understanding, they realise the area is covered in ammonia. If they've not yet innovated it, the survivor settlement gains the ammonia innovation, and we have another random hunt event. So with both of these, you're always getting some nice positives. This marked territory, if you haven't yet innovated ammonia, you should be pushing on white lions as much as you can to try and get this to happen. And that's especially helpful because, as I discussed in the previous video, the white lions actually have a lot more, well, they have one more lion-based event on their track, so you usually get them more often. However, against the level 1, it only has 2 slots, which is the same as most level 1, node 1 and node 2 monsters. In essence, what I'm saying is, if you draw ammonia and you haven't finished hunting lions, you should probably pick something else if it's equally as useful, because maybe you'll get ammonia for free. Once you're done with lions, or you really need ammonia, then you get it, but it is much better to get it for free here. The extra understanding and insanity, yeah, that's just great. Down here on the fixed side here, we've got 2. We've got Prowling Lion. While the survivors stalk the white lion, the monster hunts something else. Move the white lion 1 space away from the survivors on the hunt board in pursuit of its prey. The white lion starts a showdown with ground fighting in play, and then you build its AI deck normally. So this is one of the more dangerous hunt events. It is a reason that you're told build a set of bone darts. That's a core thing to do in the core game. The only time you stop doing it is if you have a different node 1 monster. And even then, bone darts are great, but this ground fighting on a white lion, if you do not have a ranged weapon, is going to be absolutely brutal. And it's worth noting, even when you do have an answer to ground fighting, this is an extra card, so it'll get discarded, and effectively it is like an additional wound on the monster, which means like it's just bad. It's just bad all round unless you're farming the monster. Then we have Lion in Heat. The darkness is filled with an unearthly screeching and yowling. Huddled together, the survivors close their eyes but cannot sleep. Everyone suffers 1 brain damage. Classic reference to cats in heat in your neighbourhood. I'm really glad I don't live anywhere near anyone who keeps cats, because it's a horrible noise. It's a fun little piece. Obviously, it's just pure negative. It's not massively terrible. When you get to higher levels, 1 brain event damage isn't particularly tough. It doesn't scale with monster levels, so it's fine. It's mildly negative, but it is a negative. Then we got here Just Aromatic Breeze by itself. The hungry lion sniffs the survivor's musk on the wind. Move the white lion 1 space towards the survivors on the hunt board. If it moves into the survivor's space, it ambushes the survivors, and if it ambushes the survivors, they have to skip their first turn, which is horrifying. Plus you roll a random hunt event. That's why this is kind of here instead. It's supposed to be here, instead of like being up at the top and bottom, because the monster moving closer to you is good. In most circumstances, shortening the hunt length is good for you. But if it is right next to you, then situationally it's going to jump on you and you're going to get ambushed and have to skip your first turn, which can be really brutal unless you've got like a fairly well kitted out team. Early on, getting ambushed is super scary. But overall, not super likely. We'll take a look at the table in a moment. Last of all, we have our random positives. We've got 3 of them. We've got the White Lion White Lion Cub. This is a all-time classic great card. Survivors find a White Lion Club. I'm saying club. A White Lion Cub. They may choose to slay the cub. If they do, each survivor gains 1 random basic resource. The event revealer rolls on the table below. The results are 1 to 3. There'll be an immediate showdown and they'll be enraged in play. So much like with ground fighting, this means the monster effectively has an extra wound, unless enraged never gets discarded. Enraged is quite dangerous. 4 to 7, the father line shows up, begin the showdown immediately. Again, can be a benefit, especially if Overwhelming Darkness hasn't triggered yet and you're hunting higher level lions. Just skipping the rest of the hunt can be very beneficial, as long as you've planned around potentially that happening and ensured that you've done any special hunt events that you wanted to do. 8 to 10, nothing happens. If you spare the cub, they roll a random hunt event. You never spare the cub. Never, ever spare the cub. 4 basic resources, or more than that if you're playing with larger numbers or have a scout, is huge. So there's no reason to ever spare lion cubs or lion clubs. Then we've got the Sea of Golden Grass. Fields of golden grass lay ahead. The event revealer may choose to avoid the plains and roll twice on the hunt event table before moving forward. Otherwise, each survivor gains +1 courage and the event revealer rolls on the table. 1 to 3, immediate showdown, you get ambushed. So that's not as bad as the other kind of ambush, but it's still you're being ambushed. The survivors circle the tall grass loss. Roll once on the hunt table before moving on the board. Or you pick up the trail, choose to move the white lion 1 space forward or backward on the hunt event board. So, vast majority of the time, you're trading +1 courage for either a roll on the event table or getting the monster to come a bit closer. I think that's a good deal. If you get ambushed, you get ambushed. Maybe if you're struggling, you might want to roll twice on the hunt event table, but I think many of the hunt event results are at least on par with this kind of table, and you have to do it twice. So I think ultimately I would rather say worst case, outside of the ambush, I'd rather roll once on this table and then once on the hunt event table in exchange for +1 courage. So I think you always go through the golden grass. Finally, claw marks scratching grounds. Claw marks scar the ground. The survivors may choose to investigate. Each survivor that investigates gains +1 courage and rolls on the table. 1 to 3, you suffer 1 event damage to the arm's location. 4 to 8, nothing happens. 9 to 10, gain a lion claw, which will pull it out of the deck, meaning you get to start the showdown with some resources already in hand that are actually white lion based, so you have more chance of drawing other things. Everyone should investigate. Always investigate. +1 courage for this. +1 courage for 1 event damage to the arms is a good trade. Gaining the resources is incredible. And, on the whole, either you get +1 courage or you get +1 courage in a white lion claw per survivor. Occasionally you get damaged. The higher you go on the levels as well, the more armor you have. So you don't really care about taking 1 armor point damage, 1 event damage to your arms. So this is another one where you should just always roll on the table. I'd rather that over random hunt events. We'll zip back over here now and very quickly look at this, because we want to look at the showdown setup before we get into dissecting the AI, hit location and resource decks. So on the hunt track, we can see we have 2 and then the lion. This is why it isn't too bad for the white lion to move forward a space, because your event will be here, it will never step on you. And it's the same up here. The lion needs to move multiple times in order to be able to catch you off guard in that manner. The level 2 is most likely to possibly walk past Overwhelming Darkness and maybe catch you here. And also, as I mentioned in the introductory video, this has 5 5 white line events for hunting the level 3. That means this is a more predictable hunt than most other monsters, definitely the ones in the book. 5, most are at 4. Both of the other 2 in the core game are at 4, so 5 is quite notable. Okay, on to the Showdown bits. So first of all, we have our section here that goes through all of the stats. Always pay attention to this. It's public information. You get to look at what the later levels are. You don't necessarily, like, if you're trying to not spoil yourself, you don't get to know what these traits do, but you really should be looking at these because it is public information for you the moment you start like hunting a given monster. It is derived information, and you shouldn't be shy about it because it's important to look at these toughness increases and any other gained tokens. It makes a difference. So we'll start here with the instinct. The white line sniffs the air and ends its turn. Until the end of the next round, all survivors are now threats despite any effects that say otherwise. This is to help interact with the tall grass that you could otherwise potentially hide in. It also just means that the white line will always find a target, almost always. The other thing on there for level 3 white line, performs sniff against +1 accuracy token. That's not a huge deal. The white line is a very accurate monster anyway, but it can wear into the capabilities of an evasion based tank, so you do want to be aware of that. I find it is rare that the white line does sniff though. The white line is fairly easy to find a target, but it's just kind of a thing that's there. At level 1, the white line has 11 wounds, 7 basic, 3 advanced plus the final hit, so plan accordingly. 11 wounds, you should be able to work out roughly how often you wound. Should be aiming for at least 60% of a wounding rate, and you can figure out how many rounds a fight that goes normally should be, so you can tell if you're doing well or badly depending on how far the monster is on those turns. I can't do those calculations for you. That is incredibly based on what percentage hit rates you're at, how many survivors you have who attack, if you have surge, etc. But this is 11 wounds is a fairly low amount of wounds for a monster, but it will feel like a lot the first time you go against a white lion in a level 1 white lion in a campaign. And that is actually because of the toughness. So movement 6, it outpaces survivors slightly, but not a huge amount, meaning you can dash cancel it. Dash cancelling is where the monster targets you, you use the flow step to dash, and you step outside of the monster's movement range. 6 is easily something you can overcome, and so there's always the opportunity to cancel a monster's attack by dashing, and the white line, level 1 in particular, quite vulnerable to that, meaning early dash can be pretty good. Toughness 8, so following the general rule, which is we prefer to be wounding at least on a 5+, means really we want to be going into this showdown with at least 3 strength between our weapon and our survivor. That's actually a tough ask in the first Lantern year. It's one of the reasons why Survival of the Fittest is so strong. If you can trigger a birth in your first Lantern year, you can grab Survival of the Fittest, you get +1 strength, +1 evasion, they're both huge, and that means a bone sword at 2 strength is now at 3, and you're wounding appropriately. If you don't have that, you may want to be looking at bone axes, even though they're twice as expensive. They do have 3 strength. A bone club, if you have a pile of bones, could do the job fine, or if you've only got 1 bone, bone darts. I really do recommend bone darts a lot. Generally, it is more important for you to be able to wound a monster than it is for you to be able to hit one. Yes, missing feels bad, but missing doesn't cause a monster to get a reaction or draw a trap card. So I think bone darts are a phenomenal piece of design. 1, 7+3. You definitely want at least 1 for the white lion, because as we mentioned before, the ground fighting issue. At level 2, it goes up to 16 wounds, 10, 5, and then the last hit 1. Its movement increases to 7. Its toughness goes up by 2, meaning now we are looking for, that means we're trying to look for a weapon and survivor combined of at least 5 to give us the 5+ wounding. And then in the last one we go up to 14, which is a jump of 4 points. So now we are looking for like 9 strength baseline to handle it all. On the damage front, this is a pretty typical scaling. Level 2, +1 and +1. That puts it on par with a Node 3 level 1 monster. and then at level 3 it gets the typical +2 and +2, pushing it nearer like a level 2 Phoenix in difficulty. It also gets +2 accuracy, so it cuts into evasion tank builds, which is why shields become more and more important as time moves forwards. And also gets +1 luck, which pulls back on any critical wound based builds. In regards to the Showdown, the key things to always look at is how far away we're deploying. In this case it's a 6 space distance, and what terrain do we get fixed and how much random terrain do we get. So we're always getting tall grass, which is going to be 2 pieces of tall grass, meaning we get help with our evasion, and we also have a place where we can hide, and it has mechanical interactions with the legendary card. And I forgot to mention the level 3 White Lion. It has 10 + 9 +2 +1, so 22 wounds to kill, assuming it doesn't heal. Yeah, so tall glass, very nice and helpful. That means any evasion items that you bring along get stronger until the White Lion starts gaining accuracy itself. That's part of the reason it gets +2 accuracy at level 3, is to kind of help counter the tall grass. 2 additional random terrains means we get a fair amount of variety in there, and a bit of a lot of opportunities for other resource generation or similar. So White Lions are pretty good at giving you additional things. In regards to the Aftermath, this is a pretty standard Aftermath. +1 hunt XP, +1 weapon proficiency if eligible. At level 2+, you increase the hunt XP to +2, meaning like if you're able to hunt level 3s, you prefer to hunt level 3 over a level 2. The defeat is, apart from losing the Showdown, which we always want to avoid if we can, you have a 50% chance of losing a jewelry gear card you've taken with you. There is some very, very good jewelry keyword cards. If you are going to be bringing them along, then make sure you've got something you can sacrifice. The single cheapest item to cover that is the stone noses. They only cost an endeavour to make. So if you've gotten a piece of jewellery like, say, the cat eye circlet, which is really good, make sure to have a buffer item so you don't end up losing it, because you may not get the resources needed to craft another one. Finally, we have the rewards. You get the Catarium for the first kill, pretty normal. Level 1, 4 basic, 4 White Lion, pretty standard. Then at level 2 we get 2 extra White Lion resources, and at level 3 we get 2 more for a total of 8, and an Elder Cat Tea Strange resource, which is a bone resource. Additionally, if you have Saga, when you defeat a level 3 plus White Lion, you gain +2 endeavours in the next settlement phase. That's fantastic. And the survivor who deals the killing blow gets +1 permanent accuracy and strength for the very first time you kill a level 3. So it is really nice to kill at least one level 3 in a campaign where you have a White Lion, even if the Elder Cat Teeth isn't the best resource, strange resource. That does change when you have access to the Gambler's Chest, but we won't cover that here as it's not on the simulator. So on the whole, these are kind of our baseline rewards. This is what we'll be comparing to when we look at any future monsters. We also need to know the contexture, the build of the resource deck, which we will get to. But yeah, 4/4, 4/6, 4/8 +1, and then a Saga-based benefit, which we want Saga, so that's going to be very helpful regardless. Okay, well, now it is time for us to get to the decks. So we're going to start up here with looking at the stat profiles and the basics, and I've included both the White Lion and the White Giga Lion here, as the White Giga Lion is just a variant White Lion and predominantly uses the same cards. I'm just going to cover those separately after these. So we've been through the White Lion status card, so the only thing left to do is just quickly look at the basic action. We can see closest survivor in field of view, so it doesn't care about threats, this particular basic action, and it doesn't care about range. So if you are the closest survivor and the White Lion can't reach you, it's still going to come after you, it's just going to fail to connect and attack. And this is our baseline attack, move and attack. 2 speed, 2 plus accuracy, 1 damage. 2 plus accuracy, turns out that is as high as it can be, but it also is actually kind of high for a node 1 monster. We'll see across the White Lion's attacks, the vast majority of them are variants of this claw. Okay, and flipping back here, we can see we only need to look at 2 traits. Indomitable, I'm not going to cover. That is a trait that goes on all level 3s. You can have a look at that. It's a common thing to all. So we have at level 2 Cunning. At the end of each monster's turn, the monster extends its claws, flow step. So you've got an opportunity to dash here, or surge if you think you can kill it. Then, if there are any adjacent survivors, target 1 at random and full move the White Lion directly away from all threats. The target suffers grab. So it will, well, grab 1 survivor, drag them away, isolating them, and it will put them down in its front facing, directly in front of it, which means the lion has actually placed itself between you and the rest of your group. So being grabbed, pretty bad. Dash is something you really want to consider having before you move on to level 2 White Lions and Giga Lions. It is super, super helpful, and I think that is, for me at least, that's why dash is kind of essential. You can attempt to tank these, but one target is going to get hit and it's at random, so if you've got multiple survivors you have to stand next to the monster, you're not really going to have a very good way of controlling this, so ideally you just dash. Then at level 3 we have Merciless. Merciless archives the beast's paw, strange hand and straining neck from the monster's hit location deck. You always treat survivors as threats, and grab deals double damage. So grab normally is 1 damage per monster level, so 1 for level 1, 2 for level 2, 3 for level 3, but it gets doubled by Merciless, so it goes to 6. This means grabs from the level 3 White Lion are absolutely horrendously terrifying. Don't let them happen. Really don't. Then the White Giga Lion. Okay, so White Giga Lion cannot be fought at level 1. The level 2 version has 16 wounds, which is the same, but it has more toughness. Sorry, same toughness. It has more movement, I mean. It has movement 8, meaning it's harder to kite and avoid. Same toughness and same speed and damage, but it also gains Giga Claws and it gains Smart Cat on top of the deck. So Smart Cat, it isn't really an additional wound because Smart Cat, as we look at it, archives itself, but it does mean that the White Giga Lion will have a lot more moods usually in play than others. We'll look at Giga Claws in a moment. Let's get on to the level 3, which if we take a look, it has 1 more basic, 1 less advanced, 1 less legendary, but it actually has one of the legendaries already in play. So its overall total cards in deck, therefore by wounds, is slightly less, but it has several cards in play already. I didn't mean to click on that. It has a different instinct. Okay, so it has the same name, Sniff, so it will work with the normal White Lion cards, but it gains +1 accuracy and +1 luck tokens, and then it's placed in the center of the showdown board facing most survivors, and we shuffle the hit location deck and place the gigantic pendulous paunch on top of it. We'll look at that in the hit location section of this video. It does mean that overall you get slightly less traps when fighting the White Giga Lion because it's constantly reshuffling its discard pile back in when this is triggering, but also, as mentioned, it's quite hard for the White Lion to really trigger Sniff too often, so it's a very edge case. Now we'll take a look at its specific unique traits for it, which are over here. They are Vicious and Giga Claws. Vicious is an upgraded version of Cunning. You can see, by the artwork here, it's a more over-the-top version, more bodies. It reads, at the end of each monster turn, the monster gets low to the ground, preparing to dash away. Flow step, again, so you can dash, you can surge, do what you need to. Target all adjacent survivors, full move the monster, even if there are no targets, away from all of the threats. All targets suffer grab. So this is getting everyone, which in some ways is bad because everyone's getting hit, but in some ways is better than cunning because the White Gigalion is not isolating anyone. And if you have a survivor who is sitting far away from the whole situation and they're able to encourage and start an encouraged chain, you can kind of ride through some of this at times, but it is still preferable to dash and avoid being hit by this. It also really, I need to zoom out ever so slightly, there we go. It also really rewards like reach and range on weapons, so you can attack them also without being adjacent, thereby it only really is adjacent to the one survivor. The other way to handle that is to have your front facing tank end their turn one space away from the White Gigalion, so when it attacks it needs to move to you, and the survivors who are in the blind spot are now no longer adjacent, meaning only the tank has to dash. White Gigaclaws, whenever the monster collides with a survivor, it snags them with its hooked claws and they suffer grab. You can't suffer more than one grab at a time. When a survivor suffers grab, roll 1d10. On a 9+, they get skewered and suffer bleed 1. So not only does it cause grabs more often, so whenever it runs over someone, like through any other kind of effect, and generates a collision, it'll grab. We will see that as being a mechanic for the White Gigalion. It likes to collide and grab. It also upgrades to a 20% chance of bleed 1. So when fighting a White Lion, you should always remember bleed control anyway, but do not forget it against the White Gigalion. Okay, on to our cards. So I've arranged them in this little grid of our AI cards, and we have in the left here, these are attacks, then we've got intimidates, moods and traits, and then like a miscellaneous. In this case it's self-healing. I believe it's just the one card, it's self-healing. So we will walk through all of these, and I've kind of ranked them from top to bottom in how dangerous I think they are. So the top pile is like the softest, and the bottom pile on these is the most like dangerous and concerning. And we'll start up here with our weakest, in quotes, attacks. And we have, to start with, Claw, which there are 2 copies of, as you can see. Claw is almost the same as the basic attack of the White Lion. It just has slightly different targeting. So closest threat facing in range, and then the secondary targeting is closest threat in field of view. So if you put a survivor in front of the White Lion and it draws Claw, it's quite likely to go for, well, it will go for that survivor. Otherwise, if you have a survivor standing on the flanks right adjacent to it, it's going to pick that survivor instead. So this is a very common thing. The White Lion is quite facing threat focused. It will sometimes override that and go for knockdown survivors. When it does that, it's pretty terrifying. Like when it starts savaging knockdown survivors, that's a bad case. We have our usual flow step before the move and attack, and the attack profile is the same. This is like what we consider our baseline attack profile. This is what we'll be comparing other things to, including across other monsters. 2 speed, 2+ accuracy, 1 damage per hit. Very simple, very basic, still threatening. Next up we have Grasp. So Grasp is targets closest knockdown survivor in range first, so it prioritizes any survivors that have been knocked down by intimidates or grabbed or have taken heavy injuries. And then after that it goes for closest survivor in range. So this is something to pay attention to. If you know that the White Lion grabs, or you're not sure on all the White Lion's moves yet because you haven't seen them all in the discard pile, be aware leaving a survivor on the floor could result in them getting targeted. Now Grasp is kind of a mixed bag. It very nearly went towards sort of the more scary pile. The reason I haven't though is it's only a 1 speed attack. It's 1 speed, 2+ accuracy, 1 damage, and after damage it will isolate the target by performing grab. It will full move away and grab the targeted attack. That's the really bad part, but at 1 speed you should be able to block this, dodge this, or it may not hit if you've piled on enough evasion. That low speed keeps this from being absolutely terrifying. But we can see that again, when we're looking at targeting, most of the time this is a closest survivor in range. So again, by keeping proximity for our tank, we can control how the monster's going to behave. We just know if it likes grasping, it might prioritize a knockdown survivor instead, so be aware of that. If some survivor messes around with a piece of terrain that causes them to get knocked down, and you don't know if the monster's going to grab or not, you should probably encourage that survivor back up. Next of all, we have our singletons. So first up, we've got Bat Around. Closest threat facing in range, very familiar. If there isn't that, if there's no one in the front facing or they're out of range, then it's going to do closest threat in field of view, pretty standard. This is 2 speed, 5+ accuracy, 1 damage. With after damage, it will deal brain damage equal to the monster's level. 5+ accuracy is horrendously bad for a monster. This is very easy to cap out. The White Lion can only hit you at 10s. You're super happy if a White Lion does Bat Around because of how inaccurate it is. And even the after damage effect, suffering brain damage equal to monster level, most of the time that's preferable to suffering bleed or any other kind of effects like knockback or similar, because brain damage, the White Lion isn't a super brain damage orientated monster. It has some, but not a massive amount. So this is definitely an incredibly soft card. I'm very happy for the White Lion to have this in its repertoire. We have Vicious Claw. This is very similar to our basic action. Key thing, this is random survivor in range. It is not often the White Lion does this. This is a very hard card to control. Fortunately, it is a claw with bleed 1 on it, so that is not terribly scary. And it also can be cancelled if you've removed the strange hand because of the lost hand result down there, basically making it a blank card. So despite it being quite randomly scary, the fact that you can disable it and it just doesn't do anything beyond give adjacent survivors +1 understanding once per lifetime is huge. So this is another soft card, pretty happy to see it. Power Swat, another basic action. Closest threat facing in range, first target. Second target, closest threat in field of view. So that's our standard targeting. It is 1 speed, 2+ accuracy, 2 damage, and after damage, knockback 6. So the 1 speed is what holds this card back. The overall result of the high damage and the knockback is threatening. You almost certainly want to be dodging, blocking, this kind of thing, because taking 2 damage to a location, that's quite high as a baseline. Knockback 6 is going to put most survivors out of the combat for a round, unless they get followed up on by something else going on, such as the monster running forward from a hit location reaction. So it's scary, but because of low speed, it is handleable. It is worth noting, of course, once you're out of defensive options like dodge, or if the monster has higher speed and you can't negate all of these, you want to bear in mind the lion may be moving around a bit more than you'd hope if it's running Power Swat. Chomp. Closest threat facing in range, closest threat in field of view, very standard. Another 1 speed, 2+ accuracy, 1 damage attack, except it headhunters. So it always hits the head. This makes it a bit more threatening, but not overly so once you start having armor and you have access to a bunch of other additional protective elements. Again, 1 speed, very dodgeable at level 1. It also has another injury that if you've got no jaw, it blanks and adjacent survivors gain +1 insanity. So fantastic. That's why this is in the softer period, because although it's targeting a very vulnerable location, it is low speed and it can be blanked entirely by a persistent injury. Combo Claw. So closest threat facing in range, closest threat in field of view, very standard. 2 speed, 4+ accuracy, 1 damage. So second least accurate attack that we've seen so far. Very soft on that front, but if this attack deals damage more than once, you draw an AI card. So survivors who have negative evasion, or if the monster has more accuracy, this Combo Claw can become way more threatening. Usually it doesn't. Usually the monster doesn't get enough accuracy to make a difference, but it is worth bearing in mind. Additionally, it's another lost hand result, so it can get blanked. Finally, we have Revenge. Revenge is another one where the white line bucks its usual targeting. Its first thing is last survivor to wound in range, and then its secondary target is closest threat in field of view, which is normally the primary target on others. It's 2 speed, 2+ accuracy, 2 damage, and it will do a full move and a grab. So Revenge is, out of all of these softer attacks, this is the one that I put last because it's closest to being considered to be moderately dangerous. I debated back and forth where I was going to put this. It very nearly went in the pile below, and I can kind of see the argument for that. Even now I'm kind of second guessing myself, so it's sort of, maybe it should be in the next pile. Because it does everything the white line wants to do, which is it deals good damage and it grabs and isolates a target. So the main problem with this one for play is last survivor to wound in range. Usually the trick, if you know that the white line does Revenge in the deck, and we assume you aren't playing scouting for perfect info, but you're not entirely certain, but you know it has Revenge in there, is to make the target you want it to attack last. So the tank will go last of all in attacking. That does have some trickiness involved with the hit location deck and how that operates, but it is a way of handling Revenge outside. But this is definitely the scariest of this top pile. Okay, in our pile below we have 2, and this is Bloody Claw and Maul. Bloody Claw targets the closest survivor with the most bleeding tokens. Obviously in the case of ties you get to choose. Move and attack targets, 2+ speed, 2+ accuracy, 2 damage. It drains 1 survival after damage and does bleed 2. Also has the lost hand blanking. So this is, you know what? I need to put this thing here. I'm going to fix it now. Yeah, I've changed my mind. Revenge is, you're going down here. Okay, Revenge has joined this pile. There we are. Okay, it's in there. I've promoted it live. Yeah, Bloody Claw has an even more, like, this suite here is pretty bad. Bleed 2 is a lot. What you're going to desperately need to bandage that off after it happens. It can get blanked though. Last of all, in this pile we have Maul. So Maul is unusual in that sometimes it just doesn't find a target, because its targets are victim of grab last round and closest knockdown survivor in range. So victim of grab last round can include survivors who've been hit by reactions, or it can combo off some of the other cards we've looked at. Or if you have a survivor knockdown and in range, it's going to go after them. Otherwise it's just going to sniff. So if you can avoid being grabbed, if you can keep your survivors on their feet, Maul is a freebie. But if somebody is knocked down, if somebody has been grabbed and you draw Maul, this is a potential killer. It's 2 speed, 2+ accuracy, 3 damage. After damage, it gives you a bleeding token and knocks you down, leaving you vulnerable to additional like issues and cards and things like that, and you're going to have to miss your next turn unless somebody encourages you to your feet, which, you know, pretty bad. So Maul is quite situationally terrifying. Otherwise it can be like okay and be blank, so just be aware of that. Don't leave survivors on the ground. Try to not get grabbed. Hopefully once you've seen the full first lap and you know exactly what moves the monster's got, you can take a little note on your paper and know if you need to avoid Maul happening or if you're okay about it because it wasn't in the discard pile. Finally, we have just one super scary card. That's Vanish. It's a legendary card, so it should be scary. In most cases when fighting legendary monsters, high level monsters with legendary moves, your usual goal is to remove these as wounds. Vanish you might not want to, and that is because it can give you the 0 presence fighting art, but you've got to get through this attack. So this is a duration card. Duration cards, when they're drawn face down, they go back on top of the deck face up. and you do what's said, and then you'll draw them a second time in the following turn. So in the case of Vanish, the white line is removed from the board, and if anyone has the priority token, it'll be removed from them, unless it can't be. While Vanish is face up on top of the AI deck, Survivor in Tall Grass may spend an activation and roll a dice to search. On a result of 9 plus the monster is found, you place it adjacent to the Survivor and discard Vanish. When Vanish is drawn face up though, target a random Survivor, place the white line adjacent to them. That target is doomed, so no dodge, no dashing, nothing like that. It's just the target though. Everyone else isn't doomed, so they will have opportunities to do stuff. Attack target, so there's no flow step. 4 speed, that's high. 2 plus accuracy, high as it can be. 2 damage. Remember, this is on a level 3, so it's got additional damage tokens. And then if you survive this absolutely savage mauling, which from a level 3 white line is actually 6 speed, and has plus 2 accuracy tokens, and it's dealing 4 damage per hit. If you survive all of that, you get to do the Zero Presence event, which can give you the Zero Presence fighting art, which is okay. It's a secret fighting art that I think is fine. It's +1 strength when attacking the monster from its blind spot, and you get to always be considered to be in the blind spot when attacking the monster, so effectively it's +1 strength all the time. I bring it up here because my honest opinion is you kind of don't really want Vanish to happen, so it's certainly worth spending a little bit of energy trying to search and bring the monster back into play. And because you just don't have control over who's going to be attacking, and you can't direct this at somebody who's healthy and well enough to soak the hit. Instead, it could be going at somebody who's badly injured, somebody wearing light armor. This is one of those like scary cards. So there is benefits to it, minor benefits. I do think Zero Presence gets better when you're playing with Arc Survivors, because they're only allowed 1 secret fighting art and 1 normal fighting art. So it becomes more valuable here because you tend to have the slot more available for that secret fighting art. But on the whole, Vanish is worth removing. Now we have our white lines Intimidates. So the softer ones are these 2, which is size up twice. Picks a random threat in field of view. Flow step. The monster stares down its prey, turn to face the target and roll 1d10 on a result of 4+, so that's 70% of the time. The target suffers 1 brain damage per monster level and is knocked down. So knockdown synergies elsewhere, scaling brain damage, but this only works 70% of the time. That's not too bad. I think this is a fine and relatively soft Intimidate. It's certainly not as dangerous as the other option, which is down here and is Terrifying Roar. We've all encountered this one when the prologue white lion pulls this on us. It is a bad time. It targets all non-deaf survivors, so that's everyone who apart from people who are deaf. Flow step. Intimidate all targets, roll 1d10 per target on a 2+ and higher than your courage. The target suffers 1 brain damage per monster level and knockback 6. And then flow step after all that's resolved, perform basic action targeting the furthest survivor in range. So with a good amount of courage, this one softens off, but gaining courage isn't something we have a massive amount of control over. It kind of just happens while playing, so maybe you'll get there, maybe you won't, who knows. But on top of all of that, it's then going to basic action. Most of the time, you'll be deciding which survivor out of the options it's going to be going for, because they should have all been knocked back about the same distance, but the edge of the board or terrain might affect that, so be aware of it. Like having your tank being in front of the monster and the edge of the board being like 3 spaces behind you means that the monster is going to be going in a different direction quite far. This really is good at scattering the survivors. If you can, you usually want to have all the survivors standing, like attacking either on the same flank or in the blind spot. So if they get pushed back, they're at least somewhat grouped together, but it can be tough. Usually this scatters the group in 3 directions if it does cause everyone to knock back. Okay, moods and traits. So the White Lion is actually quite a heavily mood-based monster. It's not the heaviest, but it does have a fair amount. All of the moods are advanced cards. So that's something you can be aware of. If you can track advanced cards when fighting monsters a bit easier than basics. You can, of course, write it all down, do a little tally. So you're like, okay, we've seen all the basics. We know what they are. We've seen all the advances. We know you don't have to worry about these. That's all perfectly like smart, good play. You might be able to keep it up in your head. If you can, fantastic. These moods, I put them together. They vary a little bit, but they all can be quite threatening if you're not prepared for them. Our first one is Bloodthirsty. Draws an AI when you get it, and then you put tokens on Bloodthirsty whenever any survivor suffers damage, and when 3 tokens are present or more at the start of the monster's turn, you'll take all of the tokens on there, get rid of them, and the white line will get to do a basic action. Once Bloodthirsty is drawn, it's not going away unless removed by specific mood removal, so effectively the monster has wounded itself for a point, but traded that for usually an extra basic action every 1 to 2 turns. The goal generally once the monster goes to Bloodthirsty is to burst it down as fast as possible, or you can take your time if you've got a very good tank who can soak most of the hits with evasion and similar, but this does kind of increase the clock at which the white lion can potentially kill. Alert, Alert has a huge zone of death, like a really big zone. It's like 4 in all directions, but obviously diagonals go further. It's huge. Whenever you move into a space within zone of death, you stop your movement, you get the priority target token, alert gets discarded, and boom, the monster comes in at you. If the monster gets knocked down, you discard alert. So this is generally one you're just going to have to sort of suck up when it happens, unless you're already adjacent and maybe you can score a knockdown. You have a lot of control over who is going to get targeted here, because it is a survivor moving into a space within the zone. So if you don't need to move to attack, then you don't need to worry about alert at all. But if you do, then you can choose to order your survivors and have the one who is most able to soak a basic action attack to step first, and also hopefully doesn't pull the monster too far away from everyone else. Then we've got Ground Fighting. I've already briefly talked about this. It's a notorious card for unprepared survivors, unprepared players who aren't aware about it. This can cause a very rapid wipe. So the mood has the monster flopping on its side. It doesn't draw AI. It's not going to draw any AI. When any survivor spends an activation in the zone of death, before resolving the action, the monster performs a basic action with +2 speed and +1 damage targeting the survivor. The zone of death is every single space adjacent to the white lion, including the diagonal corners, because it's a zone. When the white lion is wounded, you discard Ground Fighting. So if you have reach weapons or you have ranged weapons, this isn't a problem at all. If you don't, especially early on, quite often Ground Fighting results in the monster ending the attack before it even happens, because it deals enough damage to cause a heavy wound and knock the survivor down. That's why bring bone darts or bring a bow. Have at least one way of shooting a monster if it's going to ground fight. If it is ground fighting and you've got that ranged weapon, you can actually take a little bit of time. You can go and interact with all the pieces of terrain you want to interact with and get all of that done, and you can position your survivors in the optimal positions while the lion just kind of lazes there and waits for you to do your thing. So you can easily shortcut that and just be like, okay, well, let's roll for each piece of terrain, let's then arrange our survivors in exactly the position we want them in, and now let's start rolling to try and score that hit. So it is a big opportunity if you have the ranged weapon, reach weapon. Okay, Enraged. This is another one that when you draw, you're going to draw it. When you play it, you're going to draw another AI afterwards. While Enraged is in play, the white line gains +1 damage token per monster level. Don't forget that. So it's +1 for 1, +2 for 2, +3 for 3. And this will stay in play until a survivor suffers a dismembered severe injury or is killed, which normally will be a death. It tends to be more likely than a dismembered severe injury, because dismembered's only on a few locations. This is a very scary, tough, dangerous card. It's part of what makes the Prologue White Lion scary as well. I don't really have too much to say, except if the White Lion has this, then you're on a bit more of a clock, and it may well be time to just be aggressive. Be aggressive. Last of all, we have Smart Cat. Reveal the top 10 AI cards. That's a bunch of information, one at a time though, and you put the first 2 mood cards revealed into play, and then you shuffle the decks, you shuffle everything else back. If no mood cards were drawn as a result of Smart Cat, you draw an AI card, and then you archive Smart Cat. So this is a self-inflicted wound. Potentially it's up to 3 quote-unquote self-inflicted wounds, because if the moods never get discarded, they're gone. So the White Lion has less HP, less wounds for the whole fight. And also, as I say, it's giving you information. Every time you draw non-mood cards, you get to see a move that the White Lion is doing. It's worth paying attention to those and noting if anything's like, oh, that's pretty scary, we need to be aware that it does that, like you see Grasp or something similar. Last of all, Lick Wounds. Another advanced card. If the monster has no wounds in the wound stack, we discard Lick Wounds and we draw AI. Full move the flow step, full move the White Lion directly away from all survivors, turn to face the closest survivor and heal 1. Then flow step, return Lick Wounds to the top of the monster's AI deck. So, if you're struggling and you're having difficulty, this is something you need to get rid of quickly. But if you've done really well with the monster and you're handling it nicely and you got it covered, you could actually sit there and let the monster fully heal before removing Lick Wounds, and then get back to cutting it down a second time to generate more resources through critical wounds. It will lengthen the fight an immense amount. And there is technically even more silliness you can do, where you shove Lick Wounds down via Rawhide Headbanding, so you can sustain the monster even longer if you want to, and generate even more resources. It is theoretically and practically possible to empty the entire White Lion resource deck by doing this if you have good enough defenses and good enough critical wounding abilities. It is slow as heck, it is really gamey, and I wouldn't recommend it, but it is always worth noting that Lick Wounds or any kind of self-heal on a quarry that generates resources through critical wounds is an opportunity for a tough, powerful party to let the monster heal up and then cut it to pieces a second time. I said last up, but we do actually have one more, and that is Golden Eyes. This becomes a starting trait for the White Giga Lion, but for other survivors they have to draw this. The White Lion gains +1 speed and +2 accuracy tokens. When a survivor attacks the monster, they suffer 3 brain damage unless they're in the monster's blind spot. Survivors with 6+ understanding may ignore this brain damage by averting their eyes. If they do, they suffer -4 accuracy when attacking. If a monster is killed with Golden Eyes in play, up to 2 survivors may consume the eyes. Each gains a permanent +1 accuracy, and sometimes you can have 2 Golden Eyes and an Eye of Cat, which means you had a 3-eye cat. Work that one out. Golden Eyes can actually also appear on other monsters as well, which is why this nice little sort of the monster thing, keeping it generic, allows it to be a little bit more generic in that way. Golden Eyes, of course, makes the monster more dangerous. Higher speed, more attacks, more accuracy, blanking evasion, and also you will suffer brain damage for attacking it unless you are in the blind spot or you want to take that huge accuracy penalty. This essentially powers up the monster quite a lot and gives you more work that you're going to have to deal with, but you have that extra reward of +1 permanent accuracy for 2 survivors. And there's no cap. This isn't like once per lifetime. You can come back and do this again. So that is a nice benefit for having to deal with Golden Eyes. But it is still quite a scary card, especially on the White Giga Lion that has all those additional things that make it even more dangerous. Next up we have hit locations. I've divided the hit locations into 4 piles plus the White Giga Lion and the trap. We're going to start over here. These are the ones that either they have no effect or they have a static effect. So there's no reactions on these cards. We start with the Glorious Mane. This is impervious. You cannot wound this location, but if you critically wound it, you gain the Shimmering Mane White Line resource, which is a very good resource because it can be converted into 2 hide. It also, I believe, now has a crafting recipe. I think it's one of the patterns in the Gambler's Chest actually uses this as well, the Shimmering Mane, as a crafting resource. But if you don't have that pattern, don't bother with that. Just turn it into 2 hide. We'll look at that in the resource section anyway. Next up, Beast's Heal. It's no reaction based abilities as with all of these, so I'm always going to go straight to the critical wounds, which is against the Beast's Heal. Your precise attack ruins the monster's straining tendon. It gets knocked down. It gets a persistent injury of ruptured tendon. When the white line starts its movement, roll 1d10. On a 1 result, the white line is knocked down. Really nice, like just a nice critical to have sitting in there. The knockdown is especially powerful if you get this with a level 1 and level 2, because suddenly everybody gets to attack it while it's knocked down, and knockdown ignores reactions, makes them very easy to hit. There's no drawbacks at all, and the only way the lion gets out of it is if you draw the trap. Obviously the level 3s have Indomitable, so you're only one person's going to get this free extra attack, but that's really nice. As persistent injuries go, this one has a strong effect, but it's very unlikely to happen. It's always worth remembering every persistent injury you generate increases the odds of drawing all the other cards. So this one doesn't generate a resource. We're very happy to just not see it in the deck any longer, and that's a fair trade to have in exchange for the trap being a few percentile more likely to turn up. Next we have the all-time classic, the one that everybody has a memory of the first time they crit it, the Fuzzy Groin. The critical wound gives you the lion testes, which Adam confirmed are present on both sexes of the lions. Fine, funny. You don't think too much about it, it doesn't really matter. The persistent injury is Lost Ding Dong. Your attack destroys the white lion's healthy genitals and the monster is livid. It gets +1 damage, so that's pretty scary. But really scary, the attacker permanently gains the priority target token. The white lion will attack them until the attacker is dead or the white lion is dead. There are no exceptions. This will lock the priority target onto you. And quite often, this tends to be done by a survivor who is either crit farming, so running a build with a lot of luck, or dealing damage normally you just happen to roll, and suddenly you've lost control of where the monster's going. It's picked a target and it's going to go at that target until either you or it is dead. So I normally start to speed up and try and kill the monster more quickly if we're dealing with the Fuzzy Groin, unless we've been really fortunate and the Fuzzy Groin result is targeting the tank and the tank is in a healthy state and can just take it. So fine. Straining Neck. This is one of the very interesting and potentially useful crit wounds. You roll the dice on a 1 to 9, the monster gets knocked down. We already talked about why knockdown is great. On a 10, the monster's windpipe is crushed and it's going to die at the end of the monster's next turn, so it's getting one more turn and then it will die. So the nice thing about this is it doesn't die immediately, so you can hit it some more to try and generate more resources, or you can chill, step back and be like, we've gotten enough from this, let's pull our distance from it and we'll let it die. There's a reason this gets archived at higher levels. Beast's Femur, critical wound, -1 movement token and 1 random white line resource. We love to get random resources from critical wounds. The -1 movement is also quite significant because the white line can suffer a number of minus movement injuries. It's a little bit more likely than other detrimental ones, and that increases the odds of us being able to cancel its attacks. If we get enough -1 movement tokens on any monster, it becomes virtually helpless, especially if we're running reach and range. Speaking of which, Beast's Knee. This is a critical wound that shatters its knee and it gets a -1 movement token. So we got 2 here for -1 movement. And last of all we have the Soft Belly. Critical wound is 1 random white line resource And then the persistent injury is Organ Trail, a reference to Oregon Trail, I think. And you roll a dice whenever the White Lion draws an AI card, and on a 1 it will suffer an additional wound. Getting the soft belly injured early on can really be helpful, but I mean, this is on average 1 wound every 10 AI cards. That isn't necessarily 10 turns, because there are things like moods that will trigger multiple AI card draws. On the whole, this isn't a huge deal as a persistent injury, but it can make a difference over a longer, dragged out fight. It's just effectively a invisible 5th player who only hits on a 10, well, on a 1, and automatically wounds. So it's nice to have, it's nothing amazing. Then we've got our wound results. That should not be in here, that's supposed to be there. Right. Our wound results, there's 3 of those. Beast ribs. If the attack has 3+ understanding, the sound of cracking ribs is encouraging the attack against +1 survival. That is just beneficial. And then the critical wound is also really good. It breaks the White Lion's ribs, and the White Lion gets a -1 toughness token, meaning suddenly you're 10% more likely to wound. That's absolutely fantastic. Beast's Brow. Snarling, the monster swats at its attacker. The attacker suffers 1 brain damage. You'll notice this isn't 1 brain damage per monster level, it's just 1 brain damage, meaning it doesn't scale with monster level. And then it performs a basic action targeting the attacker. Obviously, that is going to change the facing of the monster, and how dangerous that is depends on what kind of armor soak you've got. But we're seeing a little trend that will have continued, is that the White Lion quite often retaliates with basic actions. The critical is -1 accuracy. That's really good because it's effectively +1 evasion for everyone. But the White Lion is a very accurate monster anyway, so it's tempered a little bit. However, then we get to go, but we also have tall grass in the picture, so this -1 accuracy overall is more significant than you would think at first glance. Beast's Flank. Wound. Cats hate this, it gets very upset, and you gain the priority target token, so you know where the monster's going on its next specific target. It's going at you. A critical wound knocks it down, so that's great against the level 1 and level 2. It's still good against the level 3 or higher, but it just becomes less powerful than it could be unless you're going to nest attacks inside attacks and try and be a bit cheeky with the rules. Our failure hit locations. We have a lot of these. Now, the key thing to take from just this first glance as I scan through them all here is the White Lion punishes you a lot for failing. And most of these failures are going to involve basic actions or move forward and grab. So be aware of that. You know, White Lions are here to teach you that you should not fail wounding if you can at all avoid it. And this is a big part of our teaching lesson. First of all, we have the Beast's Ear. The failure results in the White Lion jumping backwards. It doesn't turn, it moves backwards 1, cancels all unresolved hits now at a range. That means it may collide with anyone who's in the blind spot. And remember that the White Giggle Lion has extra triggers on collisions. The critical wound makes the White Lion partially deaf, and it gets -1 accuracy. And we talked about why reducing the accuracy of the White Lion is pretty good, so that's fine. Failure. Sorry, the Beast's Scapular Deltoid has a failure of run forward on grab, and that's the same with the Beast's Chest, Beast's Elbow, and Beast's Back. So I'll just look at the failure result, and then after that we'll look at each individual critical wound. So the failure results in the White Lion full moving forward in a straight line. It cancels all hits that are now out of range, so if you're melee attacking or using reach, you're probably out of range now. And any survivors it passes over will suffer grab. So we discussed grab before, that is you get placed in knockdown in front of the monster and you suffer 1 damage per monster level. Being grabbed's pretty bad because it's either going to cost you your entire action or cost a survivor survival as they encourage you back up to your feet, or fist pump if you have that survival move. This is what gives us the general rule when fighting the White Lion of try and clear all survivors directly in front of it out of the way before you start attacking it. because, and especially don't just take an opportunistic punt at the white survivor if you've got the white lion, if you've got bad like strength, because triggering this failure can put a survivor in a very bad position where now they are isolated, they're on their own, the monster's between them and the rest of their party, and they're knocked down and they've taken damage. So just bear that in mind. If you're in the corridor in front of the white lion, you probably want to try and get out of there before anyone attacks, or at least minimize the number of attacks that are going to happen before you move out of that way. So one of the reasons I really like having a tank with a counterweighted axe against a white lion is they can be in the front facing on a diagonal and still attack the monster and worry less about getting run over. Onto each of the critical wounds. The beast's scapular deltoid has a -1 movement token again, so we're seeing how we can very much compound and generate a lot of -1 movement tokens onto the white lion, which can make it struggle to get anywhere near any survivors. That's part of the reason why lick wounds can result in a very easy but slow showdown, because you can cripple the white lion to the point that it only has 1 or 2 or 3 movement, and suddenly it is going to struggle to do anything at all that's threatening. The beast's chest is right in the heart. It's a random white line resource and a 10% chance, a lantern 10, on killing the monster instantly. So this is essentially, when you hit the beast's chest, you have a 1% chance of scoring a immediate showdown ending kill, because 10% for the 10 and then another 10% of that 10% for the kill. Or if you think of it another way, you're rolling 2d10 and trying to get double lanterns on it, that's a 1% chance. So great, can't catch you off guard. Always a positive unless you're trying to crit farm, in which case the white lion may have died too quickly for you. Beast's elbow. Critical wound on this is non-death survivors gain +3 insanity and may stand if they're knocked down. This is why you probably don't encourage any survivors to their feet until just before the monster's turn. On the off chance you hit the elbow, that's a nice little extra bonus. But otherwise, this is just fine. Bit of extra insanity, fine. Beast's back, very simple, -1 accuracy token for the crit. Again, that can compound on top of other accuracy and debuffs from the tall grass and whatever evasion you've got, so it can go towards, again, creating a situation where the white line is struggling. Now we have our basic action failures. So in the case of Strange Hand, Beast's Tricep, Beast's Temple, Fleshy Gut, they're all just a normal basic action. The Beast's Paw does a basic action with +2 damage. So the Beast's Paw is quite bad to fail on, but in all cases you're being punished for failing. Your goal usually is to not fail on your wounds, unless you're getting pretty desperate. So all of those kind of things in regards to the basic action. Remember, there's a flow step in it. People who aren't the attacker can do survival actions like Surge during the middle of that, so you could potentially, if the white lion's close to dead and it starts performing one of these basic action attacks, you could kind of get in there with a survival action, maybe a dash to move in range, and then a Surge to drop in that attack and hopefully drop the monster before it completes its basic action. You want to look for windows of opportunity like that. On the crits, we'll go through them separately. Strange Hand, this is a very famous crit location because this is the first hit location most people playing ever encounter. On the crit, you generate the Lost Hand Persistent Injury, which we've seen affects a lot of AI cards. So it's a really good one to trigger against the level 1 and above. The Prologue White Lion is actually unaffected by the Strange Hand, Lost Hand. But later lions can be very heavily impacted by it. Additionally, you can spend a survival to treasure the moment and gain a +1 permanent strength. I think that's a really good deal. Trading 1 survival for +1 permanent strength on virtually any kind of non-support survivor, so damage dealers and tanks and off tanks, whatever, they all like having extra strength, so it's a really good deal, and I will take it almost every time because of how strong +1 strength is. The Beast Tricep discards a mood currently in play and knocks the monster down. very straightforward. It's nice to be able to get rid of a mood. You do get to choose which mood if you've got multiples. We discussed the moods, and things like Enraged are probably the higher priority targets for that particular discard, but it will depend on the situation. The Beast's Temple has persistent injury, where whenever the white lion draws an AI card, you roll 1d10 on a 1 or 2, you discard the card and end the monster's turn. This is a really strong, really strong persistent injury. You've essentially concussed the white lion. Very happy to have this, and remember that you're still drawing the AI card. You could just get discarded and blanked, but you'd still trigger things like the soft belly result, where you roll for the wound. So that's really nice. Then we have the Fleshy Gut. Very simple. The white line vomits all over you. Gain a random basic resource, so you get its lunch and +3 insanity. Nice result to have. Interesting to have a random basic resource as the crit result. That's not super common. Then we got the Beast's Paw. This is the really scary one with the +2 damage. It gets another -1 movement token on the crit. You gain a Lion Claw. Very happy to get a Lion Claw. And you get to disable grab. The higher level monsters, busting this with a critical wound is massive, because we've already seen how much like the grab scales at the level 3 is doing a ton of damage with grabs, and knocking this off is absolutely fantastic. If it can't grab you, then you're in a really good spot. So this is, against the higher levels, a absolute priority. If you could line a Founding Stone up at this when fighting a level 3, you would chuck it every time. This is the best persistent injury to hit against the higher level white lions, and it's very solid against the level 2 as well. It's fine against the level 1 also, but obviously because of how much grab scales at the level 3, it has the biggest impact there. Finally, we got the Beast's Maw. This is a bit different to the other failure reactions. The monster roars triumphantly. You roll 1d10, and on a 4+, you suffer 1 brain damage per monster level, and you get knocked down. So this is a knockdown that can happen during your turn, leaving you on the ground and vulnerable if it's going to maul you in its turn, so watch out for that. The critical does the no jaw persistent injury, which we saw which AI cards that affected. And you get to roll the dice, and on a 5+, that's 60% of the time, the jaw flies off the monster, and you gain +1 courage and +1 survival, which is a nice little extra bonus. This is a decent, anything that blanks an AI card is pretty decent to get, but obviously the Beast Paw is the best crit for the purposes of disabling high level versions of the White Lion. Okay, finally we have one single reflex card. So reflexes trigger regardless unless you get a critical wound. So this keeps the white line a bit softer than other monsters, because it doesn't always have a reaction on a lot of its cards. It instead punishes failures more than anything else. It does a grab. It does a full move forward and does a grab. We've already discussed how that works. And the crit scores -1 accuracy again, and a the lion tail white lion resource. This is mostly the generic resource, not particularly special unless you have expansions which can have synergy with it. I'm always sad that you don't make a whip out of the lion's tail. That would be fun. But yeah, this is a location that you're only going to get that resource once. It doesn't magically have a second tail in its deck after you've cut the first one off. As we've noticed looking through all of these, and I'll just like re-highlight through them all using that one, you can see if we look through all of these, every single hit location with the exception of the trap has a critical wound on it, meaning critting white lines is incredibly reliable, and throwing a Founding Stone at a white line is also incredibly reliable. But of course, and it happened yesterday when I was teaching someone the game, you throw that Founding Stone and you hit that trap and you're like, that really wasn't likely, but that really sucks. So, yeah, it's very vulnerable to crit farming, critical wound builds, very good builds to run against the White Lion. Speaking of which, let's take a quick look at the trap. This is, I think, one of the softest traps in the game. It dooms you and it performs a basic action targeting the attacker. The key thing here is only the attacker is doomed. And there is a flow step on the basic action. So other survivors do have opportunities to do various different things during flow steps to intervene or mess around with this basic action. There is actually in the Gambler's Chest a knowledge that can interplay with this that's specifically and clearly designed for that matter. I won't go into it any further here. When we have the Gambler's Chest on the simulator, I'll be talking about all the knowledges in intense detail because I love them. But for now, to bring it back to the core game and the non-Ark Survivor experience, be aware there is a flow step. Only the attacker has been doomed. Everybody else is live if they've got survival actions that are meaningful and relevant. And then, as every trap, once it's resolved, you get the full reshuffle. Last of all, we have the Gigantic Pendulous Paunch, which is a crackingly bombastic name that I adore. This is first strike, so that means you have to resolve this first. It has a reflex on it, and it has +5 toughness. So this +5 toughness is always there, that's not cancelled by anything. Then we have a reflex reaction, and it is a highly updated and upgraded version of grab, where it jumps in the air and like moves through, colliding with the survivor in the... It lands so the survivors in the purple space, so even ranged attackers are not safe. And then it will run through the survivor, colliding, triggering grab, triggering the potential bleed and everything. So that is like very, very dangerous. This is a rare reaction that does have severe impacts for ranged attackers, which is unusual to see. I think this is a really cool piece of design, and as we saw above, the White Gigalion likes to stick this card on top of its hit location deck with its instinct, and it will, I believe, start the showdown with this on top as well. I should really double check that. No, Smart Cat is on top. Oh no, yeah, it's it's the instinct that puts it on top there. Yeah. And the critical wound has some lovely text. Should we read this? The flabby paunch sways aside. The survivors are mesmerised by the luxurious ripple of fur on the monster's underbelly. The attack connects with a crunch, winding the monster. It is knocked down. That is, I think, some prime Anna Poots prose there. I think that is really just some cracking writing. Just everything about this card is fun and powerful and dangerous. So that's the White Gigalion's extra trick on top of its status cards and slight variations in how it behaves and everything else. And that's brought us through the hit locations, and the big takeaway there, which I'll just remind you, do not stand in front of the White Lion when attacking it. If other people are in front of the White Lion when attacking it, see if you can organise the survivor order so that survivor is out of the way before you start going. That might not be possible if two survivors are in front, so prioritise moving the survivor who needs to not get run over with a grab out of the way. Crits are really good. Crit builds are really good. And look out for flow step, because there's a lot of basic actions being triggered by these cards as well. Okay, so now we have the resources. The White Lion resource deck breakdown is 7 bones, 7 hides, and one of those hides can be turned into 2 basics, so effectively 8 hides-ish, situationally, and 5 organs. Its strange resource is a bone, and it does have, if you've got the promo stuff on the simulator, it does have 2 indomitable resources, which we'll take a little bit of a look at the end of this. So to start with, on the bones front, we have 4 great cat bones and 3 lion claws. Lion claws are the better of the 2, as they're used for 2 weapons. One of the weapons needs great cat bones anyway. This is a reasonable amount of bones in the White Lion, but it trends slightly towards hide because of the hide section. We have 4 white fur, 1 shimmering mane, 1 lion tail and 1 curious hand. as I noted, but we'll just go through again, the Shimmering Mane and the Lion Tail don't have any additional like specific crafting recipes that matter. The headdress that you can make from the Shimmering Mane may look fabulous, but it is not very good. That can change with expansions. As I said, Patton uses this, and the Slenderman has a crafting recipe that uses this. The Curious Hand is just a normal hide. We've not yet had anything that specifically uses it. And when you gain this, a random survivor gets +1 insanity. So just a little bit of additional bonus. On the organ front, we have some really significant and important resources. We've got 2 sinew. You need one of those to make the catgut bow, which is a fantastic node 1 ranged weapon. The Eye of Cat is the single best resource in the deck. It makes all by itself the Cat Eye Circlet, which is the premium starter hit location scouting gear card. And honestly, you can't actually have too many of these. Even 2 or sometimes even 3 have been used at higher levels. We've lent less into them over time as we've gained more options, but I would certainly craft 1 or even 2. I'd always craft 1 of these. I would possibly even craft 2. Then we have the Golden Whiskers. This is my pick for the second most important resource. This is used to make the Whisker Harp. While there is always the problem of noisy on hunts, many Nemesis monsters have moods that you want to remove, and Whisker Harp can do that without having to attack. So I will earmark my first Golden Whiskers for making a Whisker Harp, as I don't think it's too expensive and it's really nice to have that. And then we have the Lion Testes, the hefty pair of nuts, which are used to make the Frenzy Drink and have a few other kind of different uses. I will normally spend these as a normal resource. Frenzy Drink does have some applications, but being frenzied has a lot of negative downsides as well, so I don't think the Frenzy Drink without its affinities is a high priority craft. In the case of the strange resource, we get the Elder Cat Teeth, which is just a bone. It's not even perfect, it's just a bone. It's used to make the Cat Fang knife, which isn't very good unless you have access to the Gambler's Chest pattern that upgrades it. I would generally just spend this as an additional bone, unless I have that pattern. Finally, we've got the Overgrown Dewclaw and the Layered Maxilia. The Dewclaw makes the Long Claw, which is a really good weapon. I like it a lot. The Maxilia makes the Roaring Harmonica, which I don't think is as good an item because it's got the old classic instrument drawback on it. But it is fun and is decent enough. It's worth noting both of these are perfect and bones, so currently if you have all of this in your simulator, because we don't have a physical version of the Layered Maxilia yet, then be aware you're always getting an extra perfect bone from the level 3 due to the Indomitable rules. As I say, I think the Long Claw is the better of the two, but you're only ever going to be able to craft 1 Long Claw and 1 Roaring Harmonica, so it instead just becomes a place that if you need a perfect bone and you have these cards, you can hunt a level 3 White Lion knowing that you will be guaranteed a perfect bone. You don't have to rely on the basic resource deck to drop it out. Okay, so that's all of that, and the only thing left to briefly do is talk about, on the Showdown, our tall grass. So when we're into the Showdown situation and we're setting up, this is an example of one kind of setup I will use. I may put it on one of the short edges instead, but ultimately what we have here is I like to play left side of the board. That's usually where I pull the combat to. That's just a personal preference. It doesn't mechanically make any difference. So I will tend to set up my tall grass something like this, definitely having my tank who's the first target in the initial, and then I will try and be around on flanks. Now this also is quite possible and potentially useful, because if the monster does do a terrifying roar, then most of the survivors will get pushed back to the in the same direction, as the monster will be kind of around about here for fighting. You can move the tall grass forward one. That's also fairly acceptable and reasonable. Or you could even have the tank like over here, and then maybe move this other tall grass a little bit nearer to the middle of the board if you want to make use of that, making sure it's 4 away. Tall grass is really good, and you want to be focusing your fights in and around that as much as possible. And that's it. That's the White Lion. As I say, I think that the White Lion as a whole is one of the most important monsters to the game's world. It's an incredibly important monster to the game's mechanics and status, as a thing. It is a monster that you may eventually outgrow. This is a well-designed and exciting and fun Node 1 monster. It is a perfect introduction to the game. It is teaching you so many valuable lessons. I think it is really well done. My only complaints have ever been in respect to the White Lion armour, which has multiple issues that hold it back. Not just 1 or 2, but multiple. That hasn't changed. We'll see where that goes in the future. But I will say, outside of that, I love almost all of the gear the White Lion drops, except for the Cat Fang knife. And I think that this is just such a good monster. But it is fair. You will find veteran players talking about how they are disappointed with the monster, because you can outgrow this. It is a basic set of AI. It doesn't have any massively scary things that it does way beyond what some of the other Node 1 monsters can do. To briefly rank them, I think that the Crimson Crocodile is the best Node 1 monster. I think that the Frog Dog is probably the second best now. The Gorm is third best, and the White Lion is behind the rest. But for a new player, White Lion is absolutely number 1. Absolutely great. And that's it. This has been Chapter 1. This has been a talk on everything I could possibly think of in regards to White Lions, who represent the last remnants of the previous civilization, and they gatekeep you away from starting playing your Kingdom Death, so don't let them get in the way. Teach them they need to get out of the way. Give them a good smack. Decent source of hide and bones, less so on organs, and has some incredibly good items. If you want to look at the gear selection of all of this, for the White Lion, you can check out the Caterium and U video, which is on my channel, and goes through all of the gear. And that's it. That's the end of this. So pens down, and I'll see you next time.